We are now in the second week of Lent, and we're hopefully starting to see the fruits of our Lenten practices. This makes it a good time to look back and evaluate how we are doing so far. It is far enough in Lent to get a sense of whether we are getting closer to God or farther from God, but still early enough that if we aren't seeing the positive results we are hoping for, it's still early enough to change and to do something new that might bring us more results. And to help guide us in this reflection, we have the example of St. Polycarp, who the church celebrates today. This bishop followed in the footsteps of the original apostles and helped to shepherd the church through a time of confusion as people were trying to live out and understand the faith now that the original followers of Christ were not there to ask for guidance. He also lived through a very difficult and severe persecution of the church. The people of his time were very impressed by how he faced these challenges. St. Polycarp never made it about himself. Rather, he trusted the Lord and sought only to do God's will, even when it came to his life. While many others sought to save themselves at any cost, often giving up the faith when faced with suffering. And others chased after the crown of martyrdom and trying to make it into something about themselves, trying to make it a source of glory for them. St. Polycarp did neither of those things. Instead, he just sought to imitate Christ by preserving his life until God's plan called on him to lay it down. And then he willingly and courageously accepted martyrdom. It's in that same humble focus on God and neighbor that Jesus calls us to live out our Lent today. All the practices that we took up at the beginning of this season should show a trust in God, reminding us of our need for His mercy and recognizing that He can wash away our sins even if they're dark as scarlet. Our practices should also refocus our attention on our brothers and sisters, especially on the wronged and on the vulnerable, the people that the Bible implies when they talk about widows and orphans. We should look back on our Lenten practices and see how they are connecting us to those groups. Or if instead they're leading us to focus inwardly on ourselves, making it about us. We have to see if what we have given up for Lent is connecting us to the poor, or if it's rather allowing us to be able to, humble brag. Oh, I would love to have some of that cake, but I gave up chocolate for Lent, so I'm going to have to just suffer without it. Just go ahead. Or if it's making us feel inflated, being able to look back and say, well, I didn't think I was going to be able to do that. That was going to be very hard, but I woke up every day to do an early rosary. Look how wonderful I am. Man, God really owes me one. Because if we are allowing ourselves to make it about us, if we're feeling really great about how wonderful we are, and if we are using it as an example to brag to others, saying about how much we've been doing to serve the poor, how much we gave up, how really we are doing this seriously and so strongly and so wonderfully, then I encourage you to look at how you might be called to embrace Christ's humility and to live out your Lent a little bit more privately. Because Lent should be about listening to the voice of the Lord and seeing His face in our neighbors. Because they must be about calling upon the mercy and love and power of God. Otherwise, they're just works performed to be seen, and not something that makes us like Christ, who lived in humble service and was uniting Himself constantly with the poor. So let's make sure that we are beginning this Lent well and are refocusing ourselves more strongly on Christ, more strongly on the poor. Because if we do that, then our hearts will be filled with the love of Christ. Our lives will be transformed by His presence. And then after this season of sacrifice, of humility, and of turning to God's mercy, our Easter morning will be glorious, and our lives transformed for the better by the love of God.